Venezuela suspended the office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and requests that the staff abandon the country in the next 72 hours. In Palestine, the Israeli regime continues committing war crimes with impunity. Occupation forces attacked the Nasser hospital in Han Yunis. In Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and 85 lawmakers supported a motion calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The Venezuelan government announced the suspension of activities of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in the country. Foreign Minister Ivan Hill assured that said office has shown on multiple occasions its bias against Venezuelan government policies, failing to comply with its mission to ensure respect for the human rights of the Venezuelan people. Therefore, Hill asserted that the personnel of said office must leave the country within a period of no more than 72 hours.
The
Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela announces its decision to suspend the activities of the Technical Advisory Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Venezuela and to carry out a comprehensive review of the terms of technical cooperation described in the letter of the understanding signed with said office in the next 30 days. For which reason, it requests that the personnel assigned to this office leave the country within the next 72 hours, until such time as they publicly rectify before the international community their colonialist, abusive, and violating attitude of the United Nations Charter.
On social media X, the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry reported the suspension will be to carry out a comprehensive review of the terms of technical cooperation. In the official statement, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela addressed that the office has exacerbated its attacks on Venezuela just as the world is witnessing the genocide against the Palestinian people and has responded with bureaucratic inaction. And on the contrary, this office is very active in falsifying facts and pre-qualifying situations in relation to Venezuela just to attack the sovereignty and self-determination of the country. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Michael Fakhri, urged all member states of the organization to lift the sanctions imposed on Venezuela. During his visit to Caracas, Fakhri stated that Venezuelans continue to have problems accessing enough good and healthy food due to low income. He also highlighted the government's efforts to guarantee the right to food. The high official stated that the Constitution of the South American country recognizes right to food and food sovereignty.
During my visit, I saw firsthand how unilateral coercive measures in the form of economic sanctions have constrained the government's fiscal ability to implement their social protection programs and deliver basic public services. Unilateral coercive measures imposed against Venezuela have also increased the cost of delivering humanitarian aid, and it has prevented international financial institutions from providing any financing. The harm of these measures is felt disproportionately by people living in extreme poverty or vulnerable circumstances. Unilateral coercive measures are cruel and vicious, and they hinder the realization of the right to food. I therefore call upon all relevant states to immediately review and lift sectoral sanctions imposed on Venezuela, including secondary sanctions against third parties.
In Argentina, workers and social movements marched to demand increases in accord with inflation. This in connection with the meeting of the negotiating table designated to establish the minimum wage for workers without collective bargaining agreements, in addition to defining the unemployment benefits. Workers warned that the accumulated inflation in recent months, especially in foodstuff, has been weakening the income of workers in general, hitting hardest those who were already in poverty. They also demand the adjustment of wages according to the accumulated inflation since December 2023, which according to the calculations of labor organizations represents an increase of about 85% of labor income. In Cuba was held the second international meeting of theoretical publications of leftist parties and movements, where a declaration in support of Palestine was approved. The third and last day of this meeting began on Wednesday morning, where a call was made for the unity of action of the left of the world in face of the attempts of cultural colonization and the media offensive of the great centers of power against the emancipatory efforts of the peoples. Besides, the participants condemned the clear violations of international humanitarian law in Gaza, rejected the genocide and the forced displacement of the Palestinian people. In view of this, the Spanish Deputy Manu Pineda declared that this conflict leads to uncovering masks, since some people are willing to defend Israel in spite of its obvious terrorist actions.
We are against Zionism, not against the Jews. And we are against Zionism for the same reason we are against the Nazis, and for the same reason we are against fascism. Because Zionism is an ideology, supremacist, racist, that persecutes the different, the same as the Nazis, who persecuted those who were not of the Aryan race.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In another war crime committed by the Israeli army against Palestine, at least one person was killed and many others were injured during an attack by Israeli forces on Nasser hospital in Gaza's southern city of Han Yunis. At dawn on Thursday, a civilian was killed and at least 6 patients were wounded after Israeli forces bombed the hospital's orthopedic department. The Wafa news agency reported that after entering the facility, the military opened fire in different sections and then forced the evacuation of doctors, patients, and displaced Palestinians. The hospital that housed around 300 health personnel, 450 wounded, and more than 10,000 displaced people had been under siege for 25 days, with snipers targeting those inside or in its courtyards.
There's a lot of talk about evacuation of people and a military intervention. Well, that would be a complete catastrophe. And first of all, there's no way where people can go. There's no room for any evacuation.
The population of Rafah has multiplied by 5. The city of Rafah now has 1.5 million residents. Therefore, the hospital of the martyrs Mohammed Youssef al-Najjar cannot keep up with the number of individuals I can serve, primarily due to the shortage of medical staff, essential supplies, medication, and medical equipment. Within the hospital, there is no ICU, no CCU, no CT scan, and no MRI scanner.
The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees warned of a financial crisis if funding suspended by several countries is not resumed. The UN agency detailed that 16 states suspended their contribution after Israel accused 12 employees of belonging to the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas. The head of the agency, Philip Lazzarini, assured that they will have a negative cash flow starting in March and will accelerate in April unless the frozen contributions are released. On the other hand, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, stated that the block of funding to the organization is dangerous, as it is widely known that UNRWA is an irreplaceable provider of vital aid to Palestinians. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand issued a joint statement on Thursday urging Israel to avoid a military offensive against Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. In this context, Prime Ministers Anthony Albanese, Justin Trudeau, and Christopher Luxon urged the Israeli government not to move forward with its military plans on Rafah, saying that civilians have nowhere else to go. Precisely due to the humanitarian situation in Gaza, the joint statement emphasized that a land incursion in Rafah would have devastating effects on the 1.5 million people currently sheltering in the area. In this regard, the statement also recalled that the International Court of Justice, in its interim injunction order, demanded Israel to ensure the provision of basic services and essential humanitarian assistance and must protect civilians. On Wednesday, local media in Lebanon reported that Israeli army attacks left more than 10 people dead, including children and women. In this way, the Lebanese media Al Mayadin reported that 8 people died and 7 were wounded after an attack on a residential building in the city of Nabatea, in the south of the country. Precisely, local authorities pointed out that during rescue efforts, civil defense teams managed to rescue a minor alive from under the rubble. Previously, Israeli aircraft strikes killed a mother and her 2 children in the southern town of Al-Sawwaneh and injured 9 people in the town of OHCHR. We're going to take a functional break, but first let's listen to a poem by Rafi Ziada, a Canadian-Palestinian spoken word artist and activist. The poem, written in 2011, is entitled "We Teach Life, Sir," and has today the same validity it had back then. Let's listen.
Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits, filled enough with statistics to counter measured response. And I perfected my English and I learned my UN resolutions. But still, he asked me, Ms. Ziada, don't you think everything would be resolved if you would just stop teaching so much hatred to your children? Pause. I look inside of me for strength to be patient, but patience is not at the tip of my tongue as the bombs drop over Gaza. Patience has just escaped me. Pause. Smile. We teach life, sir. Rafif, remember to smile. Pause. We teach life, sir. We Palestinians teach life after they have occupied the last sky. We teach life after they have built their settlements and apartheid walls. After the last skies, we teach life, sir. But today, my body was a TV'd massacre made to fit into sound bites and word limits. And just give us a story, a human story. You see, this is not political. We just want to tell people about you and your people. So give us a human story. Don't mention that word apartheid and occupation. This is not political. You have to help me as a journalist to help you tell your story, which is not a political story. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. How about you give us a story of a woman in Gaza who needs medication? How about you? Do you have enough bone-broken limbs to cover the sun? Hand me over your dead and give me the list of their names in 1,200 word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre made to fit into sound bites and word limits and move those that are desensitized to terrorist blood. But they felt sorry. They felt sorry for the cattle over Gaza. So I give them UN resolutions and statistics, and we condemn and we deplore and we reject. And these are not two equal sides, occupier and occupied, and 100 dead, 200 dead, and 1,000 dead. And between that war crime and massacre, I vent out words and smile, not exotic. Smile, not terrorist. And I recount 100 dead, 200 dead, 1,000 dead. Is anyone out there? Will anyone listen? I wish I could wail over their bodies. I wish I could just run barefoot in every refugee camp and hold every child, cover their ears so they wouldn't have to hear the sound of bombing for the rest of their life the way I do. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre, and let me just tell you, there is nothing your UN resolutions have ever done about this. And no soundbite I come up with, no matter how good my English gets, no soundbite will bring them back to life. No soundbite will fix this. We teach life, sir. We teach life, sir. We Palestinians wake up every morning to teach the rest of the world life, sir.
Welcome back from the south. In the United States, authorities report 1 dead and 21 wounded after a shooting took place during the Super Bowl celebrations in Kansas City. During a press conference, Kansas City's fire department chief reported that among the injured, 8 are life-threatening. Authorities also reported that 11 of the injured are children, while the total number of casualties is not final and may still increase. The incident took place in the vicinity of the Central train station. The shooting occurred in the state of Missouri, where it is legal to carry guns on the street.
She heard the shots, and then I kind of just saw everyone duck, and so we ducked behind this little barrier we were by. Yeah. And then after that, got up and have walked back here.
We were pretty close. We went to the bathroom and people started running up the street saying there were shooters down by Union Station by the intersection. We left about 2 minutes before it happened.
In Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and 85 lawmakers supported a motion calling for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. In a parliamentary session held on Wednesday, the motion received 86 votes in favor and 42 against. The initiative calls on the United States and the United Kingdom to end the legal process against Assange and allow him to return to Australia. The 52-year-old cyber activist faces more than 18 criminal charges for offenses against the U.S. Espionage Act and risks up to 175 years in prison if he is extradited to the United States. Next February 20th and 21st, the London High Court will hold the last trial to analyze Assange's final appeal against his extradition.
If he's extradited it potentially could be extradited next week after this hearing if his appeal is rejected. That means all his ties to his family, his lifeline that are keeping him alive inside that prison will be cut off, and he'll be lost into a horrific prison system in the United States, which this show of support from the Parliament is at a crucial time and now gives the government a real mandate to advocate very, very strongly for a political solution to bring Julian Assange home.
On Thursday, Stella Assange, wife of Julian Assange, during a press briefing in the United Kingdom, warned that her husband's health is deteriorating and reiterated her rejection to the British legal system.
In terms of optimism, I've learned not to be optimistic. It's gone this far. The courts have turned a blind eye to each and every of the violations, beginning with the absurdity of the case in the first place. This bogus extradition request from the United States that, if it had come from any other country, would never even have reached the courts. The UK executive would have thrown it out. His health is in decline, mentally and physically. His life is at risk. Every single day he stays in prison. And if he is extradited, he will die. But it's not just about him being extradited. Julian should never have been put in prison in the first place.
On Thursday, a Ukrainian rocket attack on the Russian city of Belgorod left at least 6 people dead and more of a dozen wounded in an area located about 30 kilometers from Ukraine. According to the report of the Ministry of Health, among the civilians killed and wounded, there are also minors. On the other hand, Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov denounced that the Ukrainian attacks targeted a shopping center, 5 apartments, buildings, and 7 houses which suffered material damage. In the meantime, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed to have shot down 14 Ukrainian rockets over the region fired by an RM-70 multiple rocket launcher system. The Russian city of Belgorod has repeatedly been the target of what Moscow considers indiscriminate cross-border shelling. The latest attack left 25 dead in December. The government of Hungary rejected a new package of European Union sanctions against the Russian Federation and other countries. During the meeting of ambassadors of the European bloc, the representative of Hungary rejected a new set of sanctions targeting almost 200 Russian, Chinese and other countries, individuals and organizations. The European Union in early January began discussions for what will be the 13th set of sanctions against the Eurasian giant. Budapest confirmed that the EU will seek to introduce sanctions against the Russian Federation before the second anniversary of the beginning of a special military operation in Ukraine. From Thursday, African leaders gather in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa, home of the African Union, for the Continental Body's annual summit, where regional integration is on the top of the agenda. The annual meeting of African leaders will question the progress made into approach the alarming security situation and conflicts in some of its member states and offer recommendations on innovative ways to sustainably address crisis in a bid to return to peace. In the encounter also will be discussed the working divisions between the African Political Organization and the Regional Economic Community. During the meeting, the President of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, called to evaluate the organisms to be more efficient and warned against the risk of resolving conflicts through barbarism. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on our social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, TikTok. TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.